If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. That's Matthew 8:15 through 19.
In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. Acts 6:1.
Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Philippians 4:1 and 2.
So if you're about to place your gift on the altar and remember that someone is angry with you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Make peace with that person, then come back and offer your gift to God. Matthew 5:23-24.
Finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. 1 Peter 3:8 through 9.
Well, good morning and welcome to Exploration Sunday. We are jumping from Acts 2, which we leaned into on our last month, where we talked about how fun it is to be family and eat together and enjoy the fellowship of one another. And as you heard in some of these passages, that quickly led into Acts 6, where we see some of the first conflict in the church and some of the first pain in the church. And so this morning, we are going to step into this theme of church is messy. And if you are just joining us, I want to welcome you. If you are not just joining us and been around a long time, I also want to welcome you. My name is Christine Nolf, and this is our Exploration Sunday, where we have set up space for spiritually curious people to engage and explore topics that are really impacting and affecting us as a church community and in the broader culture. And so I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we get to kick off another month of exploration together. We are really leaning into this exploration as we remember of who we are and set up ourselves as a family. And we're talking this month again about church as family, that it's messy. And we see ourselves as a church, as a family of Christ followers who are committed to the health of our communities. And so we're spending time exploring, what does it mean to be family? We're going to spend some time exploring in the months ahead, what does it mean to be Christ followers? And what does it mean to be committed to the health of the communities that we're impacting, those around, and for the healing of the world around us? So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're leaning in and continuing to explore with us. We will explore this first week. We'll kind of launch the topic at our first Sunday that we're going to be exploring together throughout the month. We have an opportunity to go deeper the second Monday of each month. We're launching Formation Mondays, and I'm going to share a little bit more about that. And then also in our weekly community groups, we explore the topics that we're looking at. And then on the third Sunday of each month, we come together for Family Sunday. And the Sundays that we're not all gathering here are really set aside for us to have space in our lives to practice the things that we're talking about, to be practicing this way of Jesus in our communities and in our lives and in our families. So I'm really glad that we are continuing to get into this rhythm together as a church family. And I'm glad that you're here this morning. So I mentioned that last month we talked about church as family. How did we get here? We started exploring some of the history of the church. How did the church start? How has it morphed over time? And this month, as I mentioned, we're looking at recognizing that can get messy. As we heard in some of the passages read, that conflict started almost immediately in the church in Acts. There was disagreement between how the Greek widows and the Jewish widows were being treated. And we see conflict throughout the epistles. A lot of Paul's letters to the church are really addressing either like a theological conflict or even interpersonal conflicts that have come up in the church and saying, hey, what are the ways that we can live together as a community? And so we're going to explore that some today. We've heard some of the scriptures. We're going to spend some time looking at the research. We have the luxury of now hundreds of years of research and relationships that we're also going to lean into and learn from. And we're going to hear some stories of personal experiences, recognizing that the scripture, tradition, experience all shape us, and reason and all shape us and lead, help us shape our faith as we walk out this life. And so as we get into it, we're going to have a series of conversations. I have a few people from our community that are going to share today with us. But before we get into that, too, I just want to acknowledge that this topic of church as family, that even that understanding of tying church and family can bring up like painful memories for us. That for some of us, family is not a good metaphor. If this is a family, I don't want to be a part of it, right? For some of us, church we've experienced pain and hurt in the church. And knowing that makes us hesitant to engage again. And some of the purpose of all this month is in our exploring is just to recognize that and to be able to like look at the places that we need healing, look at the places that we need to participate in the healing of others, and really dive into how do we do that well together, and recognize that we want to be a thriving family. We want to be a family that practices thriving practices with one another, and there's ways that we can learn from the scripture and we can learn from research to be able to do that. And I've had some real personal experiences with this, even since we decided to do this topic. Some things have like come to light in my own family about churches that my extended family participated in and ways that things were covered up in those churches. And it kind of got real personal for me in the last week since even as we were preparing to talk about this. And I just want to acknowledge that we as a church, and I'm talking about the global church, recognizing us as the church family, the church body, that we of the church have offended one another. We've offended you with jokes, with attitudes, with stances that we've taken. We've passed over you for a role. We didn't see your gifting when you were trying to offer it. We pretended that nothing happened. We left you alone in your grief and your hurt. We didn't listen to you. We abused you. We gave you pat answers. We felt justified in our actions and in our thoughtlessness. We've tried to control you. We snapped back, knowing that it would hurt you. We excluded you. We've covered up abuse and trauma. And we didn't come to talk to you, but talk to everyone else. That's a short list of things that I have heard from some of you, from others in the larger spiritual family, in my own family life. Things have happened, and we don't want to be a church that pretends that that it's not hard to do this well. And we want to be a church that is willing to examine ourselves and say, hey, how do we practice healthy practices as a family? How do we do this well together? And this isn't about like pointing the finger at other churches. This isn't about like, oh, I'm so glad you're all here because we have figured this out and now you're here and everything's great. This is about really wanting to examine ourselves and examine our own relationships and say we're committed to being a place that is thriving and healthy as a church family. And so we're going to get into that this morning, and I'm really excited that Courtney is here. One of our elders has been serving and been a part of this church for a really long time, serving as an elder. She's also a marriage and family therapist, so she comes with a lot of insight into this topic. So I'm going to invite Courtney up to share with us this morning.
Good morning.
Hi. This is so fun to do together. I'm really glad that you're here. Whew. I'm just going to take a deep breath.
You do that. That was a great intro.
Thanks. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in. Courtney's here with us this morning as someone who deeply loves this community and also has really been trained and has a lot of experience in this area of healthy relationships and what it looks like to be people who connect well. So I want to just ask you, anyone who has been a part of a family knows that it can be messy and painful. Mm-hmm. So in your experience and your study as a marriage and family therapist, what are dynamics that cause issues and cause us to disconnect from one another?
Yeah, so in the field of psychology, there's tons of ways to look at disconnect within family. I'm going to just say this is by no means a comprehensive list. I'm going to just take a stab at it and give you a couple that I think are really helpful in understanding these things. So I'm going to break it down into 3 different areas. So I think that breakdown often happens in family dynamics within, number 1, emotional bonding, 2, in identity formation, and then 3, in communication. So I'm going to go through those 3 things. A helpful place to start when we are looking at emotional bonding is what's called the attachment theory. Attachment is an emotional bond with another person. And the central theme of the attachment theory is that we form either secure or insecure attachment. And this is based on the responsiveness and availability of our primary caregivers in our first 5 years of life. Okay, so there's different types of attachment styles, and like I said, there's secure attachment, and then there's insecure. Underneath insecure are 3. I'm going to touch on 2 main ones, okay? This first one is called anxious ambivalent attachment. You guys know what ambivalent is? It's like this push-pull, like I want it, I don't want it, I'm sure, I'm not sure. It's created when a caregiver is inconsistent with meeting your needs. So, for example, you get hurt, and your mom is right there, comforts you, soothes you. The next day, you get hurt again, and mom ignores you and just walks away, let's say. Sorry, got to change my notes. So this plays out in relationships as an adult in being reluctant to get close to others. You're worried that someone doesn't love you, constantly questioning and doubting it. You are distraught when relationships end. Another insecure attachment style would be avoidant attachment style. This is created when parents or caregivers are largely emotionally unavailable or unresponsive. Children and babies tend to then just suppress their emotions altogether because it's like, what's the point? You're not going to notice. This plays out in adult relationships, like you often avoid intimacy, you use excuses like long work hours, you don't reach for others in times of need, you invest little emotion in social or romantic relationships. You often struggle to support partners in stressful times because you're unable and unwilling to share your own emotional thoughts, beliefs, etc., because it just wasn't safe for you. And then finally, we have secure attachment. This is created when parents are reliable, consistent, and safe. I'm going to say this is majority of people, so don't be freaked out. Most people do have a secure attachment. This infant knows that a caregiver is dependable, which creates a secure base for a child to then explore the world. This looks like having trusting, lasting relationships in adulthood. You have good self-esteem. You're able to share your feelings with your partner. You seek out social support. I also want to say, with a caveat to this, that just because you notice maybe you have a tendency towards anxious ambivalent or avoidant, that does not mean you cannot have secure attachments in adulthood. I have many clients that have come into my office that we together recognize, oh, I tend to do this in a relationship and I don't want to do it anymore. And they are able to securely attach as we work on and work through those things, those traumas, those wounds, and they have healthy marriages, healthy adult relationships as they move forward. So this explains a little bit of disconnect with like emotional bonding. Now I'm going to move on to, do you have any questions with that?
it just reminded me of a quote. As a church, we've studied before in our leadership community emotionally healthy spirituality, and in that program they talk about you may have Jesus in your heart, but you've got grandpa in your bones. And if you're not willing to look at some of this stuff or like go back and really examine it, things just play out. And so I think that I bring that up too, even just like why are we talking about this here? Like all of this impacts how we're able to relate with one another as a church family.
Yeah, I find that people often think like, oh, that trauma doesn't affect me anymore. Oh, my family, it wasn't a big deal. And they want to push it down. But I encourage people, if you find yourself continually getting stuck in something and you're like, I cannot move past this thing, it is most likely connected to some sort of origin story for you. It doesn't have to be the family, but a lot of times it is. So I just want to throw that out there as well. So moving on to our identities and how those are formed, I have a couple concepts that are helpful to look at this through. Enmeshment is one, and differentiation is the other. So these are two big terms, but let's look at them a little more closely. Enmeshment is kind of identified as an over-identification with a family member's emotions, beliefs, or thoughts. Enmeshment between a parent and child will also often result in like over-involvement in each other's lives, making it really difficult for a child to become independent and develop their own sense of self. The way this can look in adulthood is this person who is enmeshed with family can lack emotional, physical boundaries with anyone in general, family and other people. You often don't think about what's best for you and what you want, but instead are always thinking about pleasing others. You try to avoid conflict. You don't have a strong sense of self. You feel like you need to fix other people's problems. This family dynamic can look like a parent or parents who don't encourage you to follow your dreams, but instead impose what they want onto you and for your life. And oftentimes family members can overshare personal things that they're dealing with in a way that creates unrealistic expectations for you maybe, creates an unhealthy dependence on that person, and then kind of confuses roles. This can often be developmentally harmful too for a kid because you're not helping them to become who they are, right? You want them to be like you, and that's what happens within enmeshed families. They kind of treat them like they're friends instead of seeing them as a child, and this can be really detrimental to a child's development. A kid often in this situation could be parentified, is a term that we often use, and they become like a little parent, and they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to stay the child. So to combat enmeshment is this term differentiation. Now, this is the ability to be in emotional contact with others, yet still autonomous in your own emotional functioning. So as a child grows up, the hope in a differentiated family is that boundaries are gradually shifting to allow for more autonomy for this child, for more independence, for greater privacy for the child, and then also the ability for them to develop their own beliefs and their own values. In healthy families, these kids are encouraged to become emotionally independent, to separate, to pursue goals, to become themselves, to not just be extensions of their family, and to share their beliefs, to share their feelings, even if different from the family in which they're coming from. So that explains a little bit of disconnect that can happen within identity formation. And now, any questions on that one?
No, I'm just going to reflect on something else. As she's talking, I was thinking of the passage in Philippians. Paul's addressing this conflict between these two women in the church, but he also admonishes them, the whole church, he says, to be of one mind, right? Like to have one love. And as I was studying that passage this week, and kind of the commentator was talking about how one mind didn't mean like that we agreed on everything or that we thought the same way about everything, but that we had a similar like mindset and posture of like an attitude about how we were going to be toward one another. And I thought that was really interesting, looking at, just thinking through what does it mean to like be of one mind and to have one love, this sense of love for one another that allows space for people to be differentiated, to have their own way of being.
No, that's really good. I feel like the church needs to work on this a lot. Okay, so moving on to how disconnect happens in families because of breakdown in communication. I'm going to use really one term here. There's so many forms of communication and disconnect, but I'm going to focus on one specifically called triangulation. I don't know if you guys have heard of this one, but this is kind of a manipulation tactic, can be conscious or subconscious, where one person will not communicate directly with a person, and instead they use a third party to get their point across. This often occurs when an outside person intervenes or is drawn into a conflicted or stressful relationship in order to ease the tension and to facilitate communication in some way. This happens all the time within families and workplaces, where you go to somebody and you're not going directly to the other person. And it can look like gossip as well within a church or within a workplace. It's often used to avoid direct and healthy communication, and it keeps people from addressing issues within their relationships. For example, let's say a couple who's having difficulty might focus instead on their daughter. They might focus on her activities, or they might even include her. A mom might complain to the daughter about what's going on within her marriage. This can cause significant anxiety for a teen that's unnecessary and not needed. Triangulation can also interfere with the child's development because, again, you're seeing your child as a peer as opposed to the child. So those are some ways that disconnect can show up in a family system. Again, there's so many more, but that's kind of a way to start. That's where I start.
Great. Thanks so much for breaking that down for us. And I think even giving us a lens to start thinking about what's shaped us, and then kind of want to make the turn to how that plays out then in healthy ways in a church family. Like what's the hope for a community? What are some ways that we could interact with each other, dynamics that would help us to be more connected in healthy ways?
Yeah, so when I was thinking through this, I feel like the first thing that came to mind is our hope is that we have a relationship with Jesus, and Jesus is the best example of someone who is reliable, consistent, secure, safe, something that's not going to let you down. And I was thinking through secure attachment, Jesus is the ultimate secure attachment. So we have hope there, number one. And that's a big deal. That's something we need to acknowledge. He provides a place of just grace and safety continuously. And it's a jumping off point for all of us as believers to give us confidence moving into the world and exploring the world. So that's hope number one. Number two, we do view the church as a family as opposed to viewing it as us being passive consumers. And if church is a family, that means we have to fight the urge to consume, and instead we have to see ourselves as active participants in the health of the church body and how it's functioning. So this is different too, right? It's a different way of approaching family. Is you have to actively participate in your family in order for it to thrive, in order for it to be healthy. You can't just sit on the sidelines and not communicate, not share where you're at. And so that's another hope I'd say. The church, I will say, it's not exactly a family in that you're not required to stay in one place for 30 years. You're not tied to the same people for your whole life. You do have autonomy in changing church communities, but you are connected to the greater church. And the hope is that we're always pursuing health in whatever church community that we find ourselves in, because first and foremost, we are the family of God. So that's a big hope as well. And then practically, I'm going to talk through 4 things that I think are helpful to create a thriving family, things that you can do within your individual families, within your friends, within our church community. So number 1, therapy. The theories I talked about today are a little bit, they're complex, they're nuanced. Maybe you're hearing some of them thinking that kind of sounds like me maybe, or I tend to do this in a relationship. Therapy really helps you to understand yourself and helps you see your tendencies based on the relationships that you have come from in your origin story, your own wounds, your own traumas. It helps you to work through those things. Your attachment style, it helps you to learn to differentiate from your own family. If you feel like, I'm struggling with boundaries, I'm struggling to find out who I am, I feel lost. therapy is really helpful for those things.
I would just share it too. We have helped as a church community. We have this fund called First Fruits that we support each other as a community when things come up, when we have needs. And on several occasions, we have used that fund to help people go through therapy. And I just want to say that out loud.
I mean, I do my own therapy. I'm a therapist. I really feel like it's just so necessary for my growth. It's a piece of my growth. It's not all of my growth. My spirituality is a piece, my connections, my relationships, my family. But therapy has been super helpful. I can speak for Aaron and I, too, in our marriage. It's been very helpful. Our first 2 years of marriage, we were having a hard time, just trying to figure out each other. And we were going through a lot of changes. And I actually was seeing the therapist. And she goes, "Why don't you bring your husband in?" Because I kept complaining about him all the time. And so I did, and he just sat there on the side for a while like a fly on the wall and would hear me talking. And it was so helpful for him because he could hear my process. He could empathize and hear my stories. He could hear the things I was coming from my traumas. And he didn't take things so personally because he was like, "Oh, this really has nothing to do with me. This actually has to do with this. I'm triggering her, but it's actually from her past. It's not because of me." And so our connection got so much deeper. And then we got into all his stories and his things. And, anyway, it's been very beneficial. Good times, yeah. We got the tools now. So number 2, I would say that I think it's really important to a thriving family is this idea of commitment. Commitment creates safety and trust within relationship. When you consistently show up and you are reliable, especially when it's difficult and uncomfortable, that is really when deep connection can grow and trust and safety can grow. And I also believe that the freedom, you need to have freedom for conflict because it's going to happen, you guys. Dysfunction is going to happen. When you have a commitment, there is freedom to have conflict and to be honest and to then have quicker repair because someone's still in it. And I would say the goal is not to not have conflict. The goal is how quickly can we repair and forgive and move forward. And that's something also that therapy has helped us with is the conflict comes up, the conflict happens, but we more quickly can say, "Oh, this is what's going on. We can move on past it now. I'm sorry. I missed that." Just so much quicker than we could before instead of staying in the conflict longer and dragging it out. And then number 3, I'd say a big deal, of course, is healthy communication. And I'm going to list a couple things within healthy communication I think are really important. Number 1 is engaged listening with the person you're talking with. That could look like repeating back to the person what you heard them saying in order to help them to feel understood. So, for example, you could say, "It sounds like you're saying this. Am I on track with that?" And also body language is really important in engaged listening. Number 2 is being willing to share your hurts, saying "I feel" statements instead of "you did this." Not blaming is important. But sharing hurts requires vulnerability and authenticity. It requires being honest, and that's really necessary for deeper connection as well. I also think within communication, it's important to be curious about the other person. And curious meaning this is a question you can ask yourself. What's going on with this person that's causing them to act this way? Okay? Instead of feeling like you're being attacked, what's going on with them? Something's going on. And it's just it's a way to create empathy for the person, and it actually makes conversation then easier for you because you're like, "Oh, something's happening. Something's happened to them for them to be treating me this way at this time." It doesn't have to do maybe entirely with me and what I've done. And then another thing I'd say that's really important, of course, is having direct communication with those you are in conflict with. And this kind of comes back to the idea of triangulation. I would say if someone's coming to you continuously, encourage them to go talk to the person that they're having the issue with. If they won't, this is something that you might not want to do in all situations, but I'll give you an example. Let's say a mom and daughter are talking, and again, the mom continues to tell the daughter about all this stuff, and she's complaining about her husband over and over again. Something you can do in order to get yourself out of the situation, say to your dad, "Oh, Mom was telling me such and such. I wonder why she's sharing this with me and not with you." That can be intense, right? I'm not saying to do this in all situations, but to be honest, like with a parent, that will nip things in the bud because you are removing yourself from the dynamic. You're saying, I'm not going to participate in this. This is what would be after you encourage them to do it first. If they don't, then you're like, okay, I'm taking myself out. One more thing I think is really important is stillness. So I know that sounds kind of counter in a way, but I think stillness, making quiet space to slow down and to be present to yourself, to be present to God is really important. And you can do this through things we've talked about as a community continuously, which are the practices of like a weekly Sabbath, daily prayer practice, a daily meditation practice. Slowing down is so important because it helps you to be less reactive, actually, to the people around you, and it grounds you. It grounds you in your relationship with God. It grounds you in yourself. Like, where am I at? What am I experiencing? You're not going to react as quickly to someone in conflict. And so that's a really big deal, I think, to practice stillness. So those are some practices I'd say help with a thriving family.
Thanks so much. I'm just sitting here racking my brain to see if I got all four. One of the things I neglected to say is we really encourage taking notes. There's some journals along the sides if you don't have one or if you want to write down on your phone. So you said the four are to reflect back our feeling. Let's see what I've got. Shout out if you know it. Reflect back what you heard. And the four communications. Stillness was the last one. To be still. To be curious. Does anyone have the fourth? Sharing her hurts. Sharing your hurts?
Well, actually, it was therapy, commitment, healthy communication, and stillness were the four main.
Okay, there it is.
Under healthy communication
there it
were
is.
those four caveats.
This is a really good reason why we should be writing these things down. Thank you so much.
I'll read them again. Therapy, commitment, healthy communication, and stillness.
Beautiful.
And then under healthy communication, engage listening, sharing hurts, curiosity, direct communication.
There it is, the bullet points. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
you so much for sharing. I know this is like years and years of both personal practice and also like your work of helping other people through that. So it's really a gift that you would share that with us, and I'm really grateful to you. Yeah. All right. We're going to move into a time of really hearing some lived experience of this. We've been like looking at some of the scriptures and looking at some of the research and reason, and we're going to shift into a space of lived experiences and hearing from some people in our community about their experiences and how they've been able to really like walk these things out that Courtney's talking about. And so I'm going to invite Matt and Alana Andrews to come up. We're going to shift over here. Courtney's going to stay up here with me so we can have like a conversation and kind of reflect back to each other. So Matt and Alana have been a part of our community for many years and really have a beautiful love for Alana. Is a bookworm and gives amazing recommendations for books. And Matt knows a ton about cars, if you want to know about cars. That is not what we're talking about this morning. But I just did want to make those connections as people want to connect with you. But what I would say, what I really appreciate about both of you, each of you, is your commitment to like continued learning and leaning into your own growth as you walk in the way of Jesus, and how you've done that and then shared that with our community is really beautiful. So I appreciate you doing that and being willing to share with us today too. So tell us a little bit just like about what you want to say about yourself and how long you've been at the church or how you got connected.
Hi. Well, we've been here for 9 years. Wow. A long time.
It's a long time. Yeah.
So we have two boys, Griffin and Weber. Griffin is 13 and Weber is almost 11. And we're originally from North Carolina, but we've been here for quite a while. So.
Yeah, and I think that in that 9 years, we've seen this community evolve a lot, right? I think that the first Sunday we attended, there was a baby dedication, and they asked for, if you're invested in these families, please come up, and we're going to pray on them. And I think that literally we were the only people left sitting in the chairs, right? So if we think about the story arc of what this church has been through, it's evolved a lot, and it's been really cool to be part of that.
Yeah, that's fun to remember and look back at that too. Yeah, well, thanks for being willing to share with us a little bit and share your story a little bit. I want to just first lean in with you, Matt, and just ask you to share. You shared with a little bit with me, like you really leaned in through some pain over these last 9 years, and I want to know if you could just share your story with her about like something that happened in this particular community.
Sure. So when I was initially asked, like, hey, we would like for you to share, I've always been up for, I'm happy to take the mic and talk, right? I mean, you guys that know me know that that's the case. But when it was, so tell us how this church community has hurt you.
Did we ask it just like that? I feel like it wasn't quite like that.
I have the mic now. So I guess I want to preface this with that this is a story of growth and redemption, and this really isn't a complaint. This isn't looking for sympathy. This isn't tattling on people. This is just kind of really a story of I mean, this is what happens with family, right? I mean, if anybody that you've known for and have been invested in for a decade, probably owes you an apology for something, and you probably owe them one too, right? So that's what this is.
True.
When this community was in its earlier stages, or at least earlier stages for us, we started a men's ministry, and I look at my own gifts, or at least the way I assess them, is that I am a leader. I'm a leader outside of this in secular capacities, and I've always enjoyed investing in other men, and I've enjoyed the camaraderie of leading in those ways. I've got strong organizational skills, and if I'm critical of myself, though, this is also how I assess my value as being allowed to lead in these spaces. And so at the beginning of the men's ministry of this church, I was part of what I would have said was a small team, but I mean, when the church was of that size, it seemed like 20 or 30% of the men that were invested in attending regularly were part of this leadership team. And so I did participate in the very beginning, and then when we started to go back to a new season, I wasn't asked to rejoin the leadership of the church, or the leadership of the men's ministry, and to help plan and to help execute those things. I mean, that, because as I said earlier, like, I assess my own value and how I'm allowed or welcomed into those spaces, that was kind of painful, right? I mean, and as I looked at, like, is this something, I mean, I did a lot of own self-evaluation of, what am I good at? Or really, why am I not seen as somebody who's valuable in this space? That was a pretty trying, experience.
Mm-hmm. What I appreciate about how you're sharing it is your ability to like be critical of yourself in that, and like look at, hey, what's the growth for me in this, or what, why is this? The way that you self-reflected, I think, is really also important, and obviously, like, this is years after, so you're able to, but even it sounds like in that space you were able to ask some of those questions, and I appreciate that part of it as well.
I'm curious for you. Oh my gosh, this one's way louder. Sorry, guys. I'm curious for you, when you first experienced that, Matt, was it like, I'm out, peace? Did it make you like so mad that you're like, I want to leave, or was it like, oh, I want to stay in it because I love this community and I need to figure this out?
I don't think it was as mature as that. I don't run. Like, I guess I fight. Now I was angry and I was hurt. Sure. I mean, I wasn't as objective or mature as I am a decade later or whatever. But I mean, really, when I think about the growth that came through that kind of as a reaction, I think I look at it as 5 things. And a lot of them, look, I could be very critical of decisions that were made, and I think that we should preface this with, that when these things happen, it's not all about personal growth, right? I mean, the church and the people that are in it are wrong from time to time, right? So, and actually, I think, Christine, when you opened, you gave this list of things that that at least the way I listened to it is that the church has done to us as individuals.
The broader church. I just want to be really clear. I'm talking very broadly.
Yeah. No. So I'm going somewhere with this. Yeah. I promise. But I at the very beginning before we opened service, I was talking to a friend and I said, hey, I'm being asked to talk about how I've been hurt by this church. I said, so this is your last chance to apologize, before we go up. And the response as a joke was, yeah, well, maybe you should open with asking people to stand that you need to apologize too. And so, but the list of things that you went through, I took as very personal as what has the church, greater church, done to us as individuals. But I think that it's also good to reflect at that list of these are things that we have also done to that church and to the people that we're in community with, right? Yeah. So as I look at the 5 areas of growth for me that came through this, is one is I do need to assess my own skills, and while I may have strength in some of these areas, recognizing where there's need, I think is important. That we aren't always going to be used in the places where we perform the best, right? And that I think that, especially when it comes to leadership, that corporate leadership or things we do outside of the church or outside of family is different, and that the leadership that I have outside of this community isn't as much a servant leadership type role. I mean, it is. It's different than that. It's corporate leadership, and I don't know that that's necessarily what is valued most in this sort of community. But I think also really importantly, what do I have bandwidth for? So if I'm really critical about what happened in that period of time, we still are at a stage as a church where we don't need leaders who can set up good operational plans and then get people to go and do those things. We need people to do the work.
Amen.
And I recognize that, I mean, with where I was in that stage of my life and my family life and my travel for work, that I wasn't able to invest the way that we needed leaders to invest at that point. And I think that the fourth one for me, which is one that I have continually dealt with, is that family life is not a contest, right? I mean that this is, and if I'm real, there were people that were better suited at that point in time for what it was we needed as a community, but my value wasn't defined as to where I stack ranked amongst these people, because I also don't think that leadership sits down and stack ranks like these. We're going to take the 3 best people that are in this type of position, and that's why people get called to do certain things. And I think that what it is, the most profound thing for me is that by being able to step back from this and recognizing I was hurt and all that sort of stuff, but was able to give me space to simply watch to understand where it was I was needed. And as I think about the things that I've done and the ways I've served this church in the last 9 years, honestly, I don't think any of them have lined up with things that I thought were my gifts. I've been asked to participate in being part of the prayer team, and humbly being part of a team where we were going to step out in faith and look for and pray for healing for people every Sunday, to pray for people when I have witnessed healing, I have been healed. I personally have never had God execute healing through me. I mean, so to step into a space like that was humbling, but has provided a ton of growth. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity or wouldn't have had space for that if I'd have been doing other things. I've led security here, which is
head of security, sisters and brothers.
Which I think is really kind of funny for somebody who dresses in pastel colors and does other sorts of things. That's probably one of the least intimidating people here, maybe to be. But and then to have come full circle and have been re-involved in the men's ministry in a bunch of different ways. I just think that I have really enjoyed stepping into a space of, rather than focusing on what am I good at and looking at what does the church need.
Thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot there. I think.
I want to ask a question. Can I ask a question, Matt?
Therapy time.
You scare me that you're going to go off script. So
I do go off script. My question for you is: at the time, what did you do with that hurt? Did you sit with it within yourself? Did you share it with certain people? Did you go to the people that hurt you? I mean, it's been years. I'm just curious. Yeah, what you did.
Yeah. So I think that there are some people that were there that I felt invested in enough, or that were safe to, that I could go, hey, I know this is still going on, and I know I've not been asked to be part of it. And so it wasn't really as much of a request for, and I want to be reconciled to you or whatever, but I almost want to know what the heck was going on, right? And I don't remember exactly, but I don't know that there were answers that that solves the issue and or resolves things internally for me. But but I did. I mean, I'm committed to those guys as friends, to this
You stayed
church.
in it. Yeah, you stayed.
That part of it was recognizing I wish that was different.
Yeah.
But moving on.
Thanks. I just think that's helpful because people just deal with hurt in so many different ways, and I was just thinking that would be helpful for the community to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
So now's where you ask me why I stayed. Is that where? Is that no? No.
Well, I was just going to ask you one more thing before
Sure.
we move into Alana's story, but
Yep.
just so it's similar. Like, why did you choose to lean in and keep serving? Because you spelled out these other ways that you did step in and help and fill needs that needed to be filled. Like, what made you lean
Sure.
in?
So a couple quick, concise things. I love the people here. I did then, and I do now. Right. And I think that if you compare this to a family. I mean, I've got a very colorful family history, and I love them, and you stay committed, and you lean in, right? I mean, you know, if you get hurt, you're going to hurt people. I'm sure you'll even the score later. No, I know that's not the message. No, I mean, no, but
I'm keeping score.
I know, right?
I'm not.
But leaving means starting over. I mean, and you're not going to be hurt by people that aren't relevant to you. But that also means that those are people that aren't able to invest in you either. So, you know, we've now been in this community 10 years, and I just don't think that you will have been making an impact in people's life if you haven't needed to apologize to them or they haven't needed to apologize for you over that period of time. And I think the most important one is reconciliation makes families stronger, right? I mean, I think about, many of the memories in this community and other friend groups and family, that how you reconcile and how you move beyond those things really defines who you are.
Yeah, I was thinking about that even when we started about how this has been a practice of our community of really, there's been times we've like sat and written letters to people that we needed to ask for forgiveness from or seek forgiveness from. This has been something that we've come to the communion table around. I think just saying, this learning how to practice these things are things that we've been committed to and want to continue to like lean into and explore how we do this well together. But I think that some of that is like getting into that practice, right? Like this is how we are with one another. So, I really appreciate you sharing your story and how that's played out too. And thanks for staying in it with us too. So Alana.
Such a good segue. Thank you for leading in.
Matt brought it up a little bit, but it's not always about us being hurt, but sometimes we cause hurt for other people as well. And that's something that we want to recognize as well. And so I wanted to share if you had an experience or you have shared an experience with me.
Yeah. So just recently it came to my attention that something that I said at our community group hurt someone's feelings. And by the way, I cleared it with her that I share this, but something that I said had upset Allison Sandin, and she felt criticized and hurt. And when I found out about it, it was in the evening, and so I just kind of tossed and turned and wrestled with that feeling and situation, and I felt very defensive. And of course, I had all those normal thoughts and feelings you have when you're in that sort of defensive space. But ultimately, I came to the fact that I really value this friendship. It's been very meaningful to me. And speaking about commitment, I'm committed to it. And the bottom line was that I hurt my friend's feelings, and I need to apologize. Didn't matter if I was right or wrong or whatever the details were. The important thing that I needed to say that I was sorry. So I called her the next morning and apologized, and she had a chance to say what she thought and felt, and I had a chance to do the same. And it was a great conversation, and it was very graceful, and she gave forgiveness, of course, and it was very life-giving, and I just hung up feeling like, well, relieved. To be honest, speaking of the avoidant family scenarios, my parents were more of the like stuff it under the rug type people. I did not learn any conflict resolution from them really at all. So this has really been an area of personal growth for me, of being able to say, like, you hurt my feelings, or I hurt your feelings, or I'm sorry, or, any of those things. Like, it's just something I've had to learn and practice and grow in. And my hope, of course, is that I can continue to do that, and that this community would be a place where people can do that as well.
I know that it sounds kind of weird, but when you shared that story with me, I was like very encouraged. Like I was strangely encouraged because I just see you two as like such close friends, and I was like, "What? That happened?" You know, and so it was encouraging for me to see like, oh, that's part of the depth of relationship that I respect about you both.
Yeah, and one thing I really observed with my parents is that grudges can really build up quickly. And if you don't deal with those little things, they suddenly become big things, and then you have a wall between you and your friend. And I just really did not want that to happen. And
So, I mean, we're all sitting out here. Some people are watching. We don't have to do this, right? I mean, this is like we're like choosing to show up. We're choosing to be here together. We're choosing to like shape a community together. What would you say are the reasons to lean in if this is like a risky thing for us?
I think that we all deeply want to be known, and I think you can't be fully known until you're known for the good and the bad, and it's so worth it to have that kind of intimacy and relationship with one another in the church community. It's hard and not always easy, but I feel like it pays off in dividends, in just care and love, and the relationships that you can have with people can be so meaningful.
Well, are there anything else that either of you would like to share with us or share with the broader community?
You mean the other list of grievances? No, no.
I can't think of
that was a joke.
I know, but I was just trying to think of what's the made-up holiday where you have the airing of grievances. Festivus will be later in the year.
I probably won't be asked to share, I guess. So, right.
Did you have anything? Okay. Well, I'm so grateful. I mean, really, to stand up here and share, to people, just to share your experiences and places that you've been hurt is a hard thing, and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you, each of you, for being willing to open up and share with us. So
it's totally worth it. Right after 10 years, it's a cool spot to be. So
cool. Can we express our thanks to Matt and Alana? Yeah, thank you both. All right, so has become our tradition in 2 months. We're going to go ahead and open up a little space for question and response. So Courtney and I are going to field some questions, and we will respond as we're able, or pass off the question, depending to one another. But we wanted to spend a little bit of time as we're processing together as a community. And so if you want to take a minute, if there's thoughts, questions that came up for you, particularly about this topic of church as family, and it can get messy, we'll take a few minutes to be able to hash through some things that are coming up for you, or questions that you want to ask. Jeff's going to go around with the microphone.
I've got batteries replaced, so it's going to work. 2 points of guidance. I won't call them rules, but points of guidance for this time. 1, feel free to ask out of curiosity. So it doesn't need to be like the best well-formulated question. We would like for it to be relatively brief, though, that said. But then 2, please don't ask with an agenda outside of maybe the scope of what was shared today. So if like this is not your time for your own personal therapy, it's also, not time to kind of explore other things that, or air grievances per se. So want you to be curious, but also avoid agendas. So that said, I will bring the mic around.
I've got 2, so I'm trying to decide which is more important and relevant. Okay. Well, do you have any guidance or thoughts on when it's best to just let it go? And when that maybe is being avoidant and missing an opportunity for deeper relationship? Because I find that I tend to just, say like, I know they didn't mean it in a harmful way. I'm not going to address it. But I wonder if sometimes that's also just fear of conflict in me.
Yeah, I mean, a question I would have to you in this situation, or to the person wondering, is does this thing keep happening? Does the issue keep coming up? Is it the same pattern with the same person? If it is, I would say it needs to be addressed. I think it's really smart, though, to stop and pause, because you're right. Not every single thing needs to be addressed. And sometimes within ourselves, we can figure out, this is my issue. It's actually not their issue. And so it is good to stop and pause. But I would say if a person is doing something continuously to you, you're seeing a pattern that keeps repeating, I do think it needs to be addressed. That's with the vagueness, that's what I would say.
I would just add to, I appreciate you bringing that up. One phrase out of the 1 Corinthians 13 love passage that comes up for me a lot that I think we don't spend as much time on is that love is not easily offended. And so I think we need to be able to speak, live in truth and love with one another, and remember that love is not easily offended.
Hi. Going back to the beginning, when you first started, you had this concept of, I think I wrote it down, disconnect with emotional bonding. And you talked about how, as kids, the reference was, we have a safe place with our parents that are consistent with us. So if we have an issue, they're there and they show up. And then as we get older, we know that that's a safe place for us. But I'm curious, as we step into realms like community groups where we have people that we don't know or we barely know or we're getting to know, what are some practical ways that we can actually practice that, where we can have that layer of safety without the history of growing up and having that person consistently there for us?
You mean, how do we practice that if we haven't had? How do we practice being safe with the people in our group if we haven't had the example of that?
I guess so, yeah. When you were describing the concept of a kid growing up with parents that are you have years and years of that parent always being there, and then you step into a community where you don't have that history. I was just thinking through what are some practical ways that we can practice that with each other. Does that make sense?
How do you set it up as a safe
I guess
space
so.
if you're not sure what you're stepping into?
Yeah. Sorry if that was confusing.
Well, I would say, if I'm answering this kind of right, I would say, consistency is key, okay, to also creating safety. So if you're new to this group, you don't know if you can trust these people yet, consistency and showing up, being present for things is a number one. That slowly can build trust with people, right? Just continually showing up. I also am thinking of this individual, if they have not had the secure base, then I would say they need to be in therapy and practicing and recognizing I had this tendency to not trust people, but I'm trying to lean into this community and I'm showing up and I'm learning to be vulnerable and I'm taking risks. And because these people have proven trustworthy with the time that I've spent so far, so I'm going to go for it. And so it is really, if you haven't had the secure base, there's a point in which you just have to risk it, and you're going to possibly get hurt, but hopefully you have the support of a therapist and other people you trust that are helping you along that as you're trying to do it with a newer community. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
So, any tips on in these group dynamics when you know that you have somebody that it tends to be on the defensive side? When it's a little bit of a tough situation to approach with them. Are there any tricks of the trade on how to do that?
Yes. Yes. I would say this is where my point to curiosity and empathy would be strong. You have to go into those conversations with this idea of something's going on with them. Something is happening with them. Something's happened to them. And so to talk with them, that's the approach I would take. I would say, what's going on? I would, with literally this kind, empathetic voice, what's happening? You're so mad. I would just identify what you're seeing. You seem angry. Are you angry? That's how I'm experiencing this. That's how I'm experiencing you. What's happened? I would just, again, almost when people are really highly defensive and reactionary, it's almost like you're talking to them a little bit like a kid. You're going to the emotion. You identify the emotion with them. You seem really sad. You seem really upset. How can I help you? And when you come to someone like that in a caring way, people soften. Their defenses come down, and they feel that. They know, like, oh, I mean, imagine it with a kid who's blowing up, freaking out. You go to them and you say, like, oh, I know you're so upset, honey. I know this really frustrated you. I mean, I know I'm saying it really dumbed down, and you can't quite do that to the degree with an adult, but you understand the point. Yeah. Which way? If someone
The question is, what if there's a conflict and someone shuts down?
What if there's and someone shuts down? I would say, number one, I'd give them their space initially. Because you can't poke and prod someone who has decided they're not going to engage. And so I would come back around to that later when they're in a place that you guys are talking and they seem like they've lightened up, they're beyond, and then I'd say, hey, you shut down. I noticed you disengaged, and I really wanted to talk with you, and I really want to understand what's going on with you. That's what I would do there.
Any other questions, areas of exploration?
Thanks, Jeff. Running around with that. I think one of the great things about having this space and then being able to go into our community groups and Formation Mondays, the second Monday, is just recognizing that there's space to work this stuff out, to explore. And I know even some of the examples that were shared were like real hurts and things that happen. And there's we've talked too about, like, church has been like a real traumatic place for some people. And so some of the point of going into this month together is to make space to reflect and spend time there and seek the Lord for, like, the ways that we need to be healed and the ways that we're participating in healing. So we're not going to figure that all out this morning, but I just want to point out again that we have set up space to do that together this month. So Courtney's going to lead us into a time of reflection right now.
So now I'm going to invite Kellen up. She's going to play over us the song Known by Name. And what I'd like us to do during this time is just kind of notice, as we were talking, as Alana and Matt shared their stories, as I shared some of these theories, these ideas, what came up for you? What kind of things popped up for you? Are you noticing your pattern of relating? Are you noticing some wounds from your past, some things from either church or from family? We want to just take some space to journal that, to offer that up to God, to just kind of open ourselves up, like we said, to this space in this moment, and to recognize that maybe this is something in an area that God wants to start healing and moving in you. So we also have a prayer team that's going to be available. Would love for you guys to go over and receive prayer. Allie's going to be over here, and so is Justin. So we're going to just have this space for you to sit. There's journals at the end if you did not bring yours today. Go ahead and write just what's come up for me. What family stuff is coming up? What hurts are coming up? Where do I need some support and some love and some guidance and some care? Okay, so just take some space.
Breathing your breath to earn His grace. His mercies are new. His mercies are new every day. And we stand in the arms of our Father, known by name. And we stand in the arms of our Father, known by name.
So as we are wrapping up today, I want to just connect a few of the family business things that we have going on. If you're just joining us, we have our Connect table over there where you can fill out a Connect card, and there's ways that you can continue to explore even if you're not in a part of a community group. So you could fill out a Connect card and put it in the basket, and we'll have some follow-up with you to get you connected with a group that you can explore with. There are some people going to grab lunch and take it over to Heller Park. So if you want to connect or hang out, or if this is your first time here and you want to meet some people, grab lunch and take it over to Heller Park. And the Alyssa, who's shouting over there, will be point person for that. You can look for her at when you get to the park. I mentioned several times this morning Formation Mondays, and I just want to point out that so the second Monday of every month has traditionally been a time where our leaders gather, and we're opening that up to whoever wants to participate and really have a space to go deeper in their formation with Jesus. So if you're looking for a place to connect, a place to be equipped, and a place to like practice the disciplines and formation practices that lead us into deeper connection, deeper healing, deeper walk with the Lord, I invite you to that. It's June 14th, and you can RSVP on our website, and that way we'll send you the address of where it's going to be at. And then we have Run for Central America, one of our partners. We're raising money for in Lasse, where they work throughout Central America equipping churches, and hunger has quadrupled in the past year in Central America in particular. And so we're doing a run, a 5K. You could walk, you can scoot, you can bike, just make it happen. And you can sign up for that at the Connect table as well. It's this coming Saturday, June 12th in the morning, and we'd love to have you participate in that. So those are some things going on in the family around here. And then I have one more exciting announcement that I want to share with you. Kellen Welch, come on up here. I'm really happy. All the love. I love it. I'm really happy to share with you that we have brought Kellen on as our spiritual formation coordinator, a new staff role that we've put together here. And so Kellen has joined our staff team as a spiritual formation coordinator. So she's overseeing our worship band, our prayer team, and really integrating that together as spiritual formation. And so we just wanted to share with you this latest staff member that's joining the team, and not new to the community, but new to the staff team, and really excited about the experience that she brings, having facilitated spiritual formation in various contexts. And she has a master's in theology from Fuller, and just comes to this position with a lot of expertise and deep love for this community. She and Taylor have been a part of the community for many years, and so it's really fun to welcome you on in this role. So, yeah, welcome. Yeah, that's great. You can sit down. Yeah. If you want. All right. I'm going to pray a prayer over us as we finish. Let me close with a prayer. Jesus, we look to you. We're grateful that you made a way for healing. We're grateful that you made a way for reconciliation and connection. We're grateful that you are the way. And so we continue to look to you. We continue to lean in with one another. Would you give us courage in the month ahead? Would you give us space for reflection?